Hello everyone. In this video we're going to talk about strings, and I'll be working in the PyCharm Community Edition. We have already talked about the string data type in previous videos. We've seen some of this in the code that we've written already. So as a bit of review, strings are alphanumeric, sometimes called textual data. And alphanumeric means that it can contain letters of the alphabet, either uppercase or lowercase, contain the digits 0 through 9, and also any of the characters that you see on the keyboard that are not alphabetic or numeric. In addition to all of those, the blank space, which is created pressing the space bar on a keyboard, is also considered a character in a string even though you can't see it. We have seen string literals already. My variable s here is being assigned a string literal. Everything between the two quote marks is part of the string. Strings in Python are also objects, which means that they have functionality attached to them, procedures, often referred to as methods, that we can take advantage of and use, and we'll take a look at that in this video as well. Concatenation is something that we have already worked with. That's where we take more than one string and bring them together to create a new string containing the characters from two or more other strings. Strings in Python are what's called immutable, which means once I have set that string, I can't actually change that particular object, the contents of it. So in this example on the screen, S contains the string. This is a string literal. I cannot actually change that. If I want to change it, I have to create a separate string with the changes based on the original. So one of the things that we want to take a look at is what's called character indexing. So let me make a copy of this. I'm going to place it here in my comments so that I can look at it without anything other than the literal string characters. If I were to count the characters here, starting with 0, and we're going to just keep one digit, so we'll go back to 0 as being 10. Using this example, I have indexed this string. The very first character, the capital T in the word this, is at index 0. I can address characters in this string based on its position in the string. For example, let's go down here and I can print. Now remember that S is our variable that actually contains this string. If I print S with an index of 2 inside of square brackets, okay, you notice that I get the letter I in my output. And if I look at my string, it's at position 0, 1, 2. One of the mistakes that's often made with indexing strings is that we forget sometimes that indexing starts with 0. So in this case, if I say S of 2, I'm actually looking at, if I'm thinking about this in terms of the way we normally look at this, it appears like I'm looking at the third character, but it's really counting from 0, 1, 2. I can also count from the end of the string and work backward by using a negative number inside the square brackets. Okay. Let's say -4. Now the interesting thing about this is that counting from the end of the string backwards actually starts at 1, not 0. So you see that it picked up the letter R, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. Once we become comfortable with the concept of indexing, we can address strings based on what's called string slicing. It uses the same syntax of what we see here with regards to the index. The difference is that I can actually place a beginning and an ending index value separated by a colon and access what's referred to often as substrings. So for example, let's say I want just the word string out of S, our variable. What I can do is I can again use the square bracket syntax, and I can give it a beginning and ending point in the string that I'm interested in. So if I start at 10 and go to 16, if you look at my index numbers, this would be 10, which is the letter S in the string. And you notice I go to 16, and the reason is because the ending value is non-inclusive, meaning it's the string from the beginning point up through but preceding the ending value that I'm using. So if I run this, I get the word string, which means I sliced the original string S and selected only a certain number of characters that I was interested in seeing. I could always do this I can always capture a substring inside of another variable name and use that individually, which is actually a fairly common practice. We'll discuss later in this series one of the areas in which Python is used quite extensively, and that's called data engineering, where we actually transform data from one system to another. And one of the ways in which we use functions like this is in that environment. There are several things that we can do also with slicing. For example, there's some shortcuts that I can create. If I leave out one of the indexes, either the beginning or the ending, that implies or infers to start at the beginning or end at the end. Meaning, if I were to run this as it is, with no index values, notice that I get the entire string. That's because I'm giving it a shorthand way of saying, I want everything that's from the very beginning to the very end. If I were to place a number here, let's say 10, that says start at the beginning, I'm giving it no index value, and go to position 10. And now you notice I only get a portion of the string. Remember that this is non-inclusive. So that's really characters 0 through 9 in terms of the index value. Okay. And I can do the same thing this way. Let's say I want to start at position 3 and just go to the end. So I leave out the second index, run it again, and now I get a portion of the string at the beginning and all the way to the end. Just like we could earlier start counting from the end of the string, we can do the same thing here. I could say maybe -5, and that says start at the end of the string, count backwards 5 characters, and if I leave out that last index, that'll say from 5 characters back to the end of the string. Okay? And that's what we see here in our output. Or I could get a substring from counting from the back of the string, like we did a second ago. Start, let's say, -5. And if I were to put -3, that would mean starting from the end of the string, count backwards 5. That's my starting point. And then also starting at the end of the string, count backwards 3. So collectively I would end up with a 2-character string. And that gives me the ER out of near the end there. So let's go back up here and just wanted to mention, make sure we are aware of the terminology. So this first part that we talked about, the indexing, is called character indexing. Okay. And then when we use the indexing concept to provide starting and ending points in the string, that's called string slicing. The next concept we want to talk about is string methods. I mentioned earlier that strings are objects, and methods in programming are procedures that are associated with objects and which provide some functionality related to that object. In the case of strings, there's actually quite a large number of methods that are built in to the string object that are available to us. I will show a few here, but you can find a full list of that in my ebook and other sources online as well, including the Python documentation at python.org. So remember that we have this string s. And if I run that, that's our full string. Notice that even though we were printing various substrings and slices and indexes from that string, it did not affect the original string. All of those print statements were just selecting that and printing it to the screen. It had no actual effect on this variable or its contents. The way in which we use methods, we can do the same thing that we have been doing. We'll just use a print statement. In order to call a method of an object, you provide the name, which in this case is s, a period, and then the name of the method. Notice that my IntelliSense is providing me with a long list. As I said, there's many methods available to us in the string object. First one I'll show is lower. Notice that there is a method name, which comes right after the period, and then there's a set of parentheses. All methods have parentheses. We are required to provide them, even if there's nothing that goes inside of them. For the lower method, there is no parameter. There are some methods that there would actually be a parameter here, and we'll actually look at one of those in a minute. What this particular method will do is we'll take the string s, and it will convert all characters in the string to lowercase. Okay, so if I run this, notice that our original string, everything was lowercase to begin with except for that first character. And in the result of calling that method, the entire string now is lowercase. Not surprisingly, there is one called upper, which does just the opposite. We now have a fully uppercased version of the string. Again, it's not affecting the original string object. We're just using that method of that string object to produce that output. Another example method I'll show is alpha. This method will check the string and will return either true or false. True means all characters in the string are alphabetic, or false, which will mean that there is at least one character in the string that is not alphabetic. So if I run this, notice that it says false, and the reason for that is because the period at the end is non-alphabetic. So I said earlier I'll show a method that has parameters in the method name, or with the method name. So the replace method says take the original string, and I'm going to specify a character or a set of characters that to search for, and any instance of that, replace it with another set of characters. So as an example, I'm going to say replace the letter S with, let's say, a capital Z. Right? So if we look at our original string, there's a letter S here and here and here. So now we see that all of those instances of the letter S are replaced by the second parameter that was provided there. Another option that is available in that particular method, we'll do the same set this time. We will specify a number, and that number indicates that I wanted just the first instance of S. Notice that the first S, which is in the word this, is replaced with Z, but the other S's are still as they were originally. As I said, there's a very long list of methods available for the string object. We will interact with several of those throughout this video series. I just gave you an example of some of the more common ones that we see usage of early on in using Python. The next concept is the Python built-in functions. Again, there are a large number of those. Print, for example, is a built-in function. We're already using that one, of course. One of the ones that's used with strings very often is length. If I want to know what is the length of this string, right? Now, what I don't do is put a period and say length. Okay? That actually does not exist. There's not a length method for the string object. Instead, I put the built-in function name in front of my variable and surround it with parentheses. If you think about it, that's the same structure as the print function as well, right? We say print and then parentheses what we want to print. In this case, I'm saying length. It's actually abbreviated LEN. And inside of its parentheses, its parameter is what is it that I want to know the length of. In this particular case, it's the string, which I have called S. And it is 25 characters. That is a total of all alphanumeric characters in the string, everything that was between the original double quote marks, including that period, for example. So the last topic I wanted to cover in this video is how to access non-alpha numeric characters. As we said earlier, strings are made up of alphanumerics, and those are the alphabet, the digits, numeric digits, and the symbols that you see on the keyboard. There are, they used to be called extended characters. That term isn't used quite as often anymore. And there is a number of character sets available for use, and you can access those a number of ways. The most extensive character set is called Unicode, and Unicode has over 140,000 individual characters that you can access that come from various human languages, character sets that exist in like Cyrillic or the Spanish alphabet, etc., and just other symbols as well, including emojis. And so the Unicode characters are available. You can find them, that is, at this address. It's actually in Wikipedia. It has a list of Unicode characters. This is quite a lengthy page. If I scroll, this will scroll for a very long time. Let me scroll down. I'm just going to go, show you a couple of these in particular. But you see here, there's these different characters, and you can view what they look like. Obviously, you're not going to memorize 140,000 characters, but there's different types that you may have interest in. There's also a unicode.org page that provides a list of characters that are really more like emojis. They're small graphic symbols. And one of the things with regards to the output of Python programs in the console, most consoles and most terminals are monochromatic, right? So they don't have colors. There are some types that do, but the standard ones for the major operating systems are not. The way in which we access these from Python has to do with, again, using the printing statement, has to do with using a particular set of symbols, which starts with the letter U, and then in quotes, a /U. A /U is called an escape character. There's actually a list of those in my ebook for reference as well, and we'll use those a great deal going forward. But instead of trying to find these in those pages, I'll just point out a couple, as examples. So, for example, 00BD, which you obviously won't memorize. If I run that, notice, and this is a little hard to see. There we go. Let me scroll. It's the 1/2 symbol. Obviously, that 1/2 symbol does not exist on a keyboard, right? So the 1/2 symbol, there's no way to actually create that with the keyboard. So Unicode has that as a symbol that's accessible. Show you another one. This particular one is the copyright symbol, right? So if you wanted that in your output, right there. So you may wonder, well, so what's the purpose of this? Because we often want to present output to the user which is user-friendly and informative. There are, in a graphic user interface application, we would have much nicer ways of presenting information. But even in a console application, we can present things in a form that that the user will find readable and approachable. So let me give you an example of what I mean by this. And I'm pasting some code here from, instead of having you watch me type all that. This is a bit of code that will create a menu. And we'll take a look at menus and how we create a more full application a little later, but this will give you an idea of what I mean by something that's visually appealing and approachable for a user. Okay, so this is a menu display that a user could interact with, and it's also visually appealing. And if you've ever seen console applications, they present information very similar to this. So you'll also notice that in this code, I'm using some Unicode characters, this 2550, which is how I got these lines, which are also not available on a regular keyboard. Those are not equal signs one after another. They're actually line characters, which are Unicode. We will work with this some more as we proceed, in the next couple of videos. But this just gives you an idea of what's possible. So in this video, we've covered strings. We've talked about character indexing. Remember that is a set of numbers inside of square brackets, immediately following whatever your variable name may be. We also talked about string slicing. That's where we use a beginning and an ending index to get a substring out of a string that we're working with. There's a large number of string methods attached to the string object, and we looked at a few of those. We can also use Python's built-in functions with strings as well, and you're going to see a lot of those, a lot of examples of those as we proceed. And then there's a very large non-alphanumeric character set of characters available to us. There are a large number of those that on the Wikipedia page that I pointed out as well. As we continue on, we will cover strings in more depth, and we'll work with them very often, so you'll become comfortable with this. The best thing to do is to practice all of these things that I've pointed out. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, and thanks for listening.